hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was a...
Really? I thought...
Well, was it? Well, I can tell you now, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did. You know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish. You know, the whole thing was just stage managed to suit them. Worst royal wedding I ever did. He was angry and I felt, you know, we were punished for that. To offend our queen like he did in that book, you know, it really upset the king. And you know, I don't think he could easily forgive that. And I imagine the king's had strong words with him over it.
Arthur Edwards has just revealed a shocking truth about what really happened at Meghan and Harry's wedding. And it isn't pretty. It's not just surprising, it's downright embarrassing for both the couple and even the royal family. The news of Harry and Meghan's marriage first came out. People in the United Kingdom were thrilled. Everyone was excited and couldn't wait for the big day. But according to Arthur Edwards, who has worked closely with the royal family for years and knows them very well, what really happened that day was nothing like what people imagined. Arthur, a man who has traveled the world with King Charles, was there to capture every special moment, every little look between Harry and Meghan. But instead of seeing magic, what he witnessed was completely different. Instead of a perfect celebration, he saw chaos going on behind the scenes. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video.
The photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away. You know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster.
The wedding was promoted as a massive event. Famous celebrities from all over the world showed up. Big names like Oprah, Elton John, and Serena Williams were all there.
You know, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, you know, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And, you know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish, you know.
Did you get a sense then that they wanted out, that they wanted a California life, that they wanted showbiz, that they weren't interested? If they weren't interested in making people feel welcome at the wedding, it just...
People were calling it the wedding of the century. But things didn't go as smoothly as the media showed. The wedding planner, who was supposed to manage everything, was completely shocked by how big the event turned out. With so many guests arriving, it became clear that the whole thing was far more overwhelming than anyone had planned for.
The guest list, beyond the lone family member she invited, was simply inviting celebrities who were total strangers to her. I could see, especially with a wedding of this scale, inviting a handful of people who you do not know, but certainly not to this extent. There were a huge amount of guests who she had never met. Some people didn't even come. Like, for example, Reese Witherspoon said, "Why would I go? I don't even know them."
Arthur describes the wedding as a total mess right from the beginning. From your TV at home, it probably looked like a beautiful, fancy event. But for Arthur and the other guests, it felt less like a party and more like a struggle to survive. The heat at the venue was so strong, it felt like it could burn anyone standing there. Arthur, since he was part of the royal circle, had to wear a traditional royal suit. So heavy, it looked like it was made for winter, not for a hot summer wedding. But there he was, sweating and uncomfortable, trying to stay calm while really wishing he could be anywhere else. He tried to look composed, but inside, all he could think about was how badly he wanted to escape the heat. Arthur and the guests were stuck standing under the burning sun with no shade to cover them, no place to cool off. Celebrities in their fancy clothes were fanning themselves desperately with the official wedding programs. It was not the kind of glamorous wedding you probably thought it was, and then came the food, or more like the lack of it. Arthur says the banquet was a huge disappointment. Instead of a big royal meal that everyone expected, the guests were given tiny finger foods. These snacks were so small and unimpressive that people left still hungry instead of full. Some guests got so annoyed that they complained, even saying they would have been better off staying home than suffering in the heat just to be given a few tiny snacks. But as bad as the heat and the food were, those weren't the worst parts. Arthur was shocked when he saw the seating plan. Important royals, some who had worked for the crown for decades, were placed in the back of the venue, while less important royals got the best seats at the front. Can you imagine? Loyal figures who served the monarchy for years were pushed to the back, while minor royals sat up close. Arthur himself was seated with one of these minor royals, completely blocking his view of the couple. He joked that it felt like he was watching the wedding through a GPS screen. If only there had been a GPS to guide through the madness of that day. At the wedding, the British media was also in chaos because Prince Harry was angry with them for how they treated Meghan when they got engaged. She was criticized and looked down on, and Harry never forgot it. So at the wedding, when he was supposed to be smiling for the cameras, he kept avoiding them, making sure there were no good photos of him and Meghan together.
Harry was angry with us, really, because some of the things that have been said about Meghan, and quite rightly, some of the things that were said about Meghan during the engagement were pretty harsh. I want to sort of mention them now, but some of them were pretty unfair as well. And so he was angry, and I felt, we were punished for that. And in fact, I never got one picture in the paper published from that day.
Arthur himself was upset by Harry's behavior. Instead of this being the wedding of the century for Arthur, it turned into the worst wedding he had ever worked on in his whole life. When he saw how badly everything was going, he just wanted it to end so he could go home and finally rest.
I think, I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding. I did Andrew's wedding. I did Sophie and Edward. They were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough. I promise you that.
The worst royal wedding.
What was supposed to be a beautiful celebration of love turned into what Arthur calls more of a formal business event. It was clear to him that for Harry and Meghan, this wedding was not just a wedding. It was a carefully planned media show made to keep all attention on them. It was not about tradition, royal duties, or the long history of the monarchy. It was about creating headlines, making noise, and keeping people talking about their names, especially because they already had plans to leave the royal family. Arthur says clearly that the wedding was nothing like the magical royal event people hoped for. Instead of a dream celebration, it felt more like a fight to survive. Guests were struggling with the heat, trying to look fancy in the burning sun, while chaos went on around them. According to Arthur, the wedding wasn't about royal tradition. It felt cold and formal, focused only on setting Harry and Meghan up for their future in the media. Harry and Meghan had a clear purpose for this wedding. The goal wasn't to honor love or family. It was to stay famous after leaving the royal family. They knew that once they gave up their royal titles, the only way to stay in the spotlight was to make sure the media kept talking about them. And that's exactly what they did. The wedding was not just a marriage ceremony. It was their big exit plan. It was their way of making sure they would remain in the public eye. Arthur believes that for Meghan and Harry, this wedding was a major turning point. It was not only about becoming husband and wife, it was about sending a strong message. A message that from then on, they would live by their own rules. They would not be controlled by the royal family anymore. This wedding was the start of their new life. A life they said was going to be private, but in reality, it was still driven by the need for fame and media attention.
He decided to leave the royal family and go his own way in the United States. And he's just behaving, I think, sometimes appallingly. Certainly some of the things he said about members of the royal family, certainly, and Camilla and Catherine and his brother. I think you just don't do that with families.
Even after the wedding, the drama did not end. Arthur says that Harry and Meghan's choice to pull away from the royal family became very clear when they made their first public appearance after the wedding. Instead of showing pride in their royal ties, they went on Oprah's show to share their complaints. They said racism and bad treatment were common inside the royal family, but Arthur did not believe it.
And it's one of the saddest things of all, Matt, of course, is that the children don't get to see their grandfather, either grandfather, and that's really so awful, because they're not getting to meet their cousins and to know their cousins, and it's such a shame for them.
Having spent many years covering royal events, he called the Oprah interview one-sided and unfair. He said it was just another example of how the couple seemed more focused on sharing their personal complaints than honoring royal traditions. For Arthur, the wedding was a symbolic moment. It was not just about a day of joy. It showed the couple's break from royal life. This was not just the wedding of the century. It was the start of their change into a media empire, a journey that would take them fully into the world of celebrity projects, media deals, and business ventures. It was not just a wedding, it was the start of their brand. And we cannot forget what happened after the wedding. In the years that followed, Harry and Meghan's choice to leave royal life became even more clear. They had their two lovely children, Archie and Liette, but their bond with the royal family grew even weaker. They kept their kids away from Harry's side of the family, saying it was for privacy. But it is clear there was more going on than they admitted.
No, most of that interview was left on the cutting room floor because it was so one-sided and it was so unfair. When I think about watching it now, and you know, the bit about Archie and the colour of his skin, and I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, would be seething. It would be so unfair.
Having cut ties with the royal family, Harry went back to London for the Invictus Games ceremony. Arthur says that he supposedly refused an offer to stay at the royal palace, saying it was because of safety worries. But does that really make sense? After all, the palace has the highest level of security. It is very well protected.
When he was over for the Invictus Games ceremony, he didn't want to stay in a royal residence that was offered to him by the king because he didn't feel he had enough protection there.
Was this just Harry's way of showing that since the wedding, he wants nothing to do with the royal family? He wanted to be left out of their world and live the normal life he had always wished for? He was so worried about his safety that he decided to stay at Coworth Park Hotel near Windsor Castle, where he could set up his own security and enjoy the comfort of choosing his own place to stay. Arthur thinks that his safety worries might have just been an excuse to explain why he preferred staying somewhere else.
Excuse, I think he wanted to stay in a hotel, and he was determined to do that. And don't forget, he travels with a small retinue of bodyguards as well. And so I suspect that was the reason why he did it. He had his own protection, and he felt that was enough.
Arthur's final thoughts on the wedding leave a strong memory. What was supposed to be a happy fairy tale moment turned into a show of ambition and personal branding. The wedding, with all its problems, has become a reminder that things are not always what they look like. What seems like a dream come true from the outside might actually be something very different behind the scenes. So, what do you think? Was this wedding really as amazing as people said? Or was it all just part of a bigger media plan? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.